Hey, what's happening, fam? It's your man, Mark Black. You know what time it is. It is time for Sucka-Free Saturday. How's the audio, by the way, fam? Let me know if everything's all good. Hopefully y'all can hear me. I can see the levels and everything is looking kind of proper, but I just want to make sure that it's straight, that we're not peeking out. Hit a 1 in the chat if the audio sounds fine, fam. I'd appreciate it. Before we get started though, fam, as always, I want to thank all of you in advance for your time today, for coming and share your Saturday with me. I appreciate you. Before we get started, make sure you look at the description field, right? In the description field of every video, there's links to resources, reports, books, you name it, to help you understand not just why, what we fight, but why we fight, right? It's important that you guys get up on that, right? So put some fat on your head, help a brother out at the same time. Each of the links to those books and things like that you purchase helps to support my work. Also, too, there are other links there as well. Those links are if you decide that you want to, throw a little bread your brother's way to help support what I do. Definitely appreciate it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do the usual. Welcome all the fam here. Ms. Denny is definitely in the house. I don't know if Prophet of Thought is still here, but if you are, brother, you were first, and shout out to you. Richard Byers in the house. Brother Richards, I see you, fam. Welcome to the broadcast. Sister Shawnee's in the house. DVM, Darker Visions, I see you, fam. Welcome to Sucka-Free Saturday. My esteemed brother Double C is in the house. Brother Art is in the house. Cool Unk is in the house. The Cool Man is in the house. Mingo, welcome to the broadcast, fam. Stakes is High is in the house. Welcome. Sister Sherry is in the house. My brother LaShawn is in the house. Welcome, fam. Warrior Scholar, peace to you, fam, and welcome to the broadcast. AL's in the house. Welcome. What's good, fam? As you know, fam, the rules are when you make your way here, let us know you're here. Brother Albert, welcome to the broadcast, fam. Good to have you. Miss Denny starting off with the super chat. I'm not even going to read it. It pops up in the chat, but I want it to come up on the screen so she can speak with her words, so to speak, right? But I thank you, Miss Denny, for the love. All right, fam. So today we are going to have us a little bit of fun.
For your efforts.
Thank you again, Miss Denny. I appreciate that. Miss Kawami's in the house. Peace, beloved. Welcome to the broadcast. Pretty Muslima's in the house. Black man, what it do? Oh, it's so good to see the family. Family, how y'all doing, by the way? Y'all always ask me how I'm doing, and I appreciate y'all's love and concern and checking on a brother. I'm ancient, right? But how y'all doing today? Type in the chat. Let me know how y'all weekend is going, right? Y'all doing good today? Y'all having a great weekend? Anything popping that y'all want me to talk about today? Or did you want to mention you had a baby? You didn't have a baby. I hope you didn't have a baby, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, how y'all doing, fam? The Cool Man said he's doing great. Cool Onk's doing good, right? That's okay. That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, fam, I just want to check on y'all every so often, man. Y'all have y'all's things going on in y'all's life, and it's important to me that y'all are doing all right. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to show y'all a little extra today and see how all of y'all are doing, right? And don't worry, I'm going to open up the line. If y'all want to call in and just say what's up to a brother, and tell me how your life is going, how things are going for you, I appreciate it. Sister Alma is in the house. Welcome. All right. So, yeah, I'm pretty upset about BGS too. By the way, for those of you who don't know, there's a brother that I esteem highly. He's an elder brother named BGS Itmore. His content's not for everybody, but I think the brother's very wise, and he's done a lot of great content that I enjoy immensely. I've learned a lot from watching his content. He is no longer going to be broadcasting because bad actors have been basically putting his family's private information and stuff out there. Fam, everybody talks about being on code, but we direly need a set of rules on how to engage with each other and how to interact with each other, because a lot of the stuff that happens is just absolutely shady. So shout out to the brother. I respect his right to establish his boundaries. he led a lot of people to water. It is up to us to drink it. And hopefully that's a lesson for us all. Make sure that you understand that people are putting their hearts and their souls and their minds, and they're opening their lives to you. That's a privilege. And at any time, should people violate boundaries and things like that, those privileges can be taken away. If people run your favorite people off of YouTube, that's a loss to all of us, whether you agree with their voices or not. We need to learn how to disagree with each other without being personally disagreeable. And the fact that that doesn't happen is a constant source of consternation to me. So, just a few words on that. I actually didn't watch Umar Johnson's Breakfast Club interview, Real Talk. I'll be honest with you. I stopped watching really anything from Umar a long time ago. When he first came to the fore, I respected Umar immensely. I thought he was very well spoken and erudite, delivered a great message about the education of black children, specifically black boys. And things like that. You see what I'm saying? So, but as time progressed and all this different stuff going on with the school, and then, him kind of trying to add different things to it, like, he's a descendant of Frederick Douglass, and trying to establish bona fides that really weren't necessary, or even, something that needed to be done in order to do the work he was stating that he was going to do. I don't really follow him like that, to be honest. I don't trust what he's saying. And so I won't give anything with him on it any real play. So I have not seen the interview, but if it's in line with everything else that I've seen from Umar, he will talk well. He will speak well. But as to how that actually plays out, you got me. He said some stuff that I think is extremely problematic at times, and Umar's just too much of a mixed bag for me to give much credence to. Sherry said, who's following Boyce to Ghana? Not me, right? Any country that would make Boyce royalty is a country I'm not messing with. No shade to Boyce, real talk, but no, I'm cool. All right, fam. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion. We are going to talk about reparations. I titled the broadcast Dream the Impossible Dream because how many times, fam, have we been told by everybody that we stupid to expect the United States government to ever honor our justice claim? You niggas is crazy if you think the government gonna ever pay you for the troubles and trials of your ancestors and this, that, and the third, right? We probably hear that at least 3-4 times a day. Everybody and their mother thinks that we're dreaming an impossible dream, right? Of course, I don't think so, but you see what I'm saying? I want us to consider the fact that we are told over and over again that we are dreaming something that will never come to pass. And here's another thing too. Of those who dream it, by the way, shout out to John Anderson, the beloved Sister Toolbox, Star Man is in the house. Welcome to the broadcast, fam. Even for those of us who believe that reparations is due and that we should fight for it, usually have a tendency to tell us what reparations is. But here's the thing, fam. No one has asked us what reparations looks like to us. We've never had any type of gathering or plebiscite. Golden Dinar's in the house, by the way. Welcome to the Sucka-Free Saturday, fam. I see you. We haven't had any plebiscites or anything like that to determine exactly what our justice claim will look like in its finality, in its completion, right? And so today, we're going to have that discussion. Today, we're going to talk about what this so-called impossible dream looks like to each of us. So what I'm going to do, fam, is I'm going to share with you initially what I think our restoration, our remediation, our repair looks like. But then I want to hear from you what you think that our justice claim looks like in its finality, in its completion, right? Now, to set up a little bit about how I've derived at the things I've derived at, I want to share with you kind of the logic, the background, right? If you can see from this picture there, right? Because I always get the pointing mixed up there, right? On the bottom of the screen, here you see a graphic of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, we talked a bit about Maslow's hierarchy, right? Now, one thing that I want to make clear, Abraham Maslow came up with this concept in 1943. Behavioral scientists and other behavioral psychologists and things like that do not necessarily see this as descriptive or predictive, right? And so I wanted to share that. I think it has some degree of validity. However, if you want more information on the so-called modern understanding of the hierarchy of needs, I'm going to pop a link in the chat to a report hosted by the National Institutes of Health that discusses Maslow's hierarchy in the current modern understanding of behavioral psychology, behavioral science, and so on and so forth. You feel me? Right? In other words, fam, while I'm going to use this as a basis for my discussion, if you're interested in understanding this in more depth, more broadly, make sure that you check out links like that and other resources that will help you better understand how Maslow's hierarchy of needs works in the current behavioral milieu. You feel me? All right. The reason why, though, that I have this intuitive sort of attachment to Maslow's hierarchy of needs is simply because I believe that the arguments he made in developing this hierarchy of needs are sensible. Right? Not giving any statement of its soundness, simply just that I find it reasonable, right? I find the statements made, the things asserted to be valid, all right? So let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs from top to bottom. As you all know, any pyramid is built from its base. And so at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have your physiological needs, right? The need to eat, breathe, drink, like sleep, you know what I'm saying? So on and so forth. You feel me? And then, of course, from there, you have your safety needs, right? Your personal safety, adequate employment, access to resources, your physical health, the possession of your own stuff and property and things like that. We get into love and belonging, like friendship, family, intimacy, a sense of connection, a sense of community, right? And then we start talking about your esteem, like having respect, self-esteem, your status in the community, and so on. And then ultimately, your ability to become the best individual you know how, or self-actualization. Okay? So when I first came across Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it resonated with me because I've often thought that a lot of the time when we engage folk, fam, we engage folk from kind of a weird place. Shout out to Kimberly Richardson, by the way. Welcome to the broadcast. We tend to come at people what I call bass backwards, right? We come at them with the cart in front and the horse in the back, right? We come at people with ideas and concepts and so on and so forth without really taking into account just where they are in relation to the needs that they have in their life. We talked a bit about this when we talked about on a previous broadcast, fam. We talked about this in the sense of people trying to educate people politically without understanding their everyday struggle, right? Their struggle to try to get the bills paid, to have a place to live, to have food on the table, and so on and so forth. I believe that I mentioned that it's difficult to talk to a hungry man about God, right? He can't hear you. His stomach is talking too loudly, right? If you're going to talk to him about concepts, ideas, and so forth, you need to meet his basic needs first so that he can then be in that proper mental space to understand you. So if we take Maslow's hierarchy of needs on its face, right, as is stated, then what restitution for our people looks like to me starts off with the means and the capability of being able to provide for our basic physiological needs first and foremost. Now, how can we assure ourselves? By the way, shout out to Unsunken. I'm glad to see you, fam. Peace and welcome to the broadcast. Sister Monty's in the house. Welcome, sister. We are going to require, in my humble opinion, first and foremost, as part of any comprehensive restitution package, we are going to need a land base. Period. First, before anything else occurs, fam, we have to have a transference of land to our people. What I think is interesting is you can see a direct correlation, fam, between our disenfranchisement from access to land and what you see today. Shout out to Kenneth White, by the way, in Engaging Black. You can see a direct correlation from the fact that we were dispossessed of access to a land base. And you can extrapolate from that a clear line of effects that still affect us today in 2019. We have had to watch over generations, fam. By the way, shout out to Dr. Miles and Mike just done it. Welcome to the broadcast, fam. I see y'all. We have had to watch, as immigrants from Europe and other places, Chinese people from China, and so on and so forth, who came here and weren't able to get access to land. We have had to watch the appreciation of each of these individual groups' wealth position. Never mind the fact that in the Homestead Acts and other acts passed by the United States government, our fellow white citizens and immigrant white citizens from Europe were able to come here and get entire sections of counties of land just given to them. We can see a direct correlation from our lack of access to land and the struggles that we've had to face in order to be able to have our autonomy, to be able to defend ourselves, to be able to provide sustenance for ourselves, and so on and so forth. Fam, with land, there's so much that you can do. Even with marginal land, right? Even with so-called wasteland, there is still a whole host of things that you can do as long as you have the dirt, as long as you have access to that land. If you have desert land, you can have access to irrigation and do greening of the desert. If you look at China today, China is actually at the forefront of greening entire swathes of the Gobi deserts and other Mongolian deserts and so on and so forth in China. They're turning desert land, fam, into something that you can grow food on, you can have forests on, and so on and so forth. So even if we had access to even the most marginal land in the United States of America, we would still come out ahead over time than where we are now. with land and the rights to that land, mineral rights, water rights, airspace, so on and so forth. It opens up a whole host of possibilities for us to be able to accumulate, not just have, but to accumulate wealth. Right? Think about this, fam. Let's say that emancipation came and your family was a member of the plantation class, right? The planter class. And you've now lost your slaves, the big house has been burnt down, and so on and so forth. But you got 100 acres of good bottomland in the Mississippi Delta capable of growing tobacco, cotton, indigo, what have you. If nothing else, fam, you can borrow against the value of your land. That value is baked in, locked in. And from just a portion of the value of your land, be able to rebuild. This is how that the scions of the planters, even though they initially took an L at the defeat of the South, by 1877, they had returned back to the wealth position that they were prior to the Civil War. Because the land itself has value. Why is it that you think, fam, that the very first thing that our fellow white citizens made sure to do before we were ever disenfranchised at the ballot box, before we were ever terrorized into submission using the gun and the KKK, before any of that, what is the one thing that whites made sure to do whenever they got a chance to do it to us? They took our land away. They took entire cities away from us, like Rosewood. They burned us out of acre after acre after acre of property, like they did in Greenwood, like they did us in Durham. Every American understands inherently that you have a chance at the American dream if you have a piece of the American soil. So first and foremost, for me, based off of my intuitive understanding of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have to have a land base. We have to. I have been of the mind, long been of the mind, that we should have at least 1 to 3 states that simply belong to us. I know that sounds impossible to a lot of you, but remember, we're already dreaming the impossible dream as proponents and advocates for our justice claim. Mama Black always told me, son, if you got a dream, dream big. Shoot for the stars and settle for the moon, right? So if we're already going to dream big, we might as well go whole hog. The people that say that black people, native black people, right, the black descendants of United States slavery need land are not wrong. Because I can tell you for a certainty, fam, that without a land base, whatever else reparations ultimately ends up being for us, we won't keep it. Without an actual land base that we have jurisdiction, autonomy, control on, nothing else they give us as far as a reparations package, as restitution, none of it will make a bit of fucking difference. We have to have a land base. Matter of fact, fam, I would argue that it is non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable whether or not we actually get access to a collectively owned and controlled autonomous land base. Because whatever ultimately ends up happening to us here in the United States of America, from that point, we will then be able to use our land base as a springboard to wealth accumulation and acquisition. But without it, we're at the whims of whatever happens to America, except we have no safe place. You know, people all the time talk about the fact that Native Americans are owed restitution just as much as we are. But here's something to note, fam. Many Native Americans were at least given some degree of marginal land. Right? You have the Lakota, the Oglala, and the Sioux, right? The different the Dakotas, the Oglala, the Lakota, up in the Dakotas, right, that have reservations and land there. You've got the Navajo that have an entire swathe of land in like New Mexico and Arizona. You've got Apaches and so on and so forth. And not only that, but they are treated essentially as nations within a nation. They also have citizenship. So Native Americans are American citizens, but within the confines of their land base, they have control over their laws, their rules, police actions, and so on and so forth. So it is not beyond the pale for us to have something like that set aside for us. Places where we have autonomy, where we control the machinery of government, where we control access to our resources, and so on and so forth, while still maintaining our citizenship as Americans. We've earned the right to be Americans. Our citizenship is not up for question. What restitution will do with a land base is provide us the means to be able to have a legacy that we don't have otherwise, a patrimony, if you will, that we can then share down the line for generations and generations and generations, and accumulate and have a store of capital. Now, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs from the foundation, from the base, we then come to safety needs. Safety is personal safety, adequate employment, health, and so on and so forth. Access to our own property, or being able to protect our own property. Right? So, with that in mind, I think that the next thing that should be a part of a comprehensive restitution package for us are ironclad, irrevocable protections, not just under law, but actual physical protection too as well. Meaning that once we have autonomy in our respective areas, laws that dictate how people are able to utilize and get access to individual weaponry or collective weaponry should not necessarily apply to us. We should have the capability to acquire whatever means or needs we need to defend ourselves. And we should also be able to request specific aid from the United States military to protect our land. In other words, just like a governor in a state can declare a state of emergency and mobilize the National Guard with military weaponry, military transportation, military backing, military support, be able to take and maintain and gain control over an area, we should have access to the same thing. We should have a mechanism by which we can mobilize the machinery of the United States government in actual physical defense of our rights and our property. Why? Because it's owed to us. You do realize, fam, that after reparations comes, that without the means to be able to defend whatever it is that we ultimately gain from the backlash of our fellow citizens, we may as well not even get it. physical security of us, the people, as well as our respective property, whether real property, personal property, and so on and so forth, is second to only the acquisition of that property and access to capital in the first place. Whatever it is we get, we need to have the means to defend it. You know, one of the things that I've often heard from conservative fellow citizens is that the Second Amendment gives us a means to protect all the rest of the amendments that we have rights to. Fam, I would encourage all of you, even prior to the institution of our justice claim being honored, I would encourage all of you to start learning how to defend yourselves and to learn how to defend your communities. I did a video on my old channel talking about violence, aggression, and defense, because there's a difference between all of them. I think you all need to go and watch that. The protection of yourselves and your families against violent attacks, against aggression upon you, isn't just a right enshrined by government. It is a natural right. A mother squirrel does not wait to ask permission to defend herself and her children from the onslaughts of a predator. She puts up paws, bares teeth, and goes to work. Fam, you essentially have no responsibility whatsoever to ask anyone for permission to defend yourselves, to defend your community, defend ultimately your tribe. I would encourage you, as a means by which to ensure that you're here for whatever restitution comes, that you start to learn means of self and collective defense. Start operating in your environment as small units. Learn small unit tactics and maneuvering. Learn how to create bottlenecks or how to escape bottlenecks, right? Now, I know all these things sound like I'm telling you to become like military people, like, you know, like we go into war against the United States. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you have a right to defend yourself from an undeclared civil war of the United States against you. And if you think that somehow or another we're going to see the honoring of our justice claim without our fellow citizens attempting to backlash upon us, you are sadly mistaken. You are sadly mistaken, fam. Peace to Paula Barnett, by the way. Welcome to the broadcast, sis. We exist to a degree in a state of undeclared civil war with us versus our fellow citizens. Currently, that war is more in a Cold War status, where we're just simply being denied resources and access to resources. Our rights individually are being violated. But American history tells us that at any given time, with the so-called right provocation, that there could be flashpoints that could initiate, at least regionally, a hot war, a hot civil war against our people. Fam, it is not going to be enough for us to be made whole through the acquisition of a land base and other real property, tangibles, if we have not developed the habits that it will take for us to ultimately be able to defend said property, said people. If we cannot defend our tribe, fam, nothing we get is going to make a bit of difference in the long run. The backlash, the pushback is a constant and ever-present reality for us here in the United States of America. Right? Sister Sherry said these white supremacists are always trying to start a hot race war. Fam, you don't have to like that reality. I don't. But you do have to understand that it is a reality of the nation in which we live. Think about this, just as a personal aside, right? Not trying to scaremonger or anything, but what happens if we get restitution and then there turns around and there's some sort of economic downturn in the country as a whole? And the government that's currently in power at that time decides to, I don't know, to scapegoat us as the reason. What do you think your fellow citizens are going to want to do to you when you have the government and the media blaming you for the downturn in the economy, for the reason why white folks can't get jobs and so on and so forth? Do you feel me? I'm just simply telling us, fam, that we need to consider these things. We need to be thinking really about these things, not in a spirit of fear, but from a spirit of understanding. There may be traps ahead for us, but the first step in invading a trap, fam, is knowing that the trap exists. For your brother Mark Black, restitution starts off with the acquisition of a land base and other real property, other real tangible property, mineral rights, access to water and airspace. And it will continue with us having the capability to be able to defend and protect ourselves, or if we're unable to do so, to not beg for protection, but to have the right to demand the machinery of the United States government up to and including military intervention in order to preserve our rights, to preserve our property. The last and kind of final thing that I want to mention is on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's love and belonging, right? Friendship, family, intimacy, a sense of connection, right? I think that the next item that has to be on the list for us for restitution is the clear, legally enshrined acceptance of us as a distinct, unique lineage across the board, from government, federal government, all the way down to the states. That has to go without saying. We will no longer forever be flattened into some people of color Crayola morass or flat blackness with everyone else in the diaspora and the continent. No, we will be particularly mentioned in every federal law, every statement of resources, and all of that as who we are. And I also think that part of that restitution requires that we get specific services from the government, not just the federal, but the state and local, for our specific health needs, mental health needs, and so on and so forth. In other words, to coin a phrase, we need lineage therapy. We need assistance with being able to heal from the traumas of 400 years of naked and open aggression and oppression upon our people. We don't get just restitution and say, okay, good luck, niggas. No. Part of any comprehensive restitution schema will have to include the means to be able to educate, to heal, to provide emotional, mental support for us as a people. America doesn't just get to tell us it's all over with. There needs to be a clear education of just what we faced across the board for every American, whether native born or immigrant. Everybody needs to know specifically what happened to us, why it happened, how it happened, because that's how you prevent it from ever happening again. That educational piece is absolutely important. The commemoration of the traumas, the struggles, the trials that we've had to face is super important. The creation of defamation laws and rules that allow us to actually seek restitution for anybody who slanders our lineage and our heritage. If you say anything anti-Semitic in some jurisdictions, you can be jailed and fined. But we can hear nigga all day and nobody has to pay shit. No. I want to be able to have an actionable claim against anybody who would denigrate, disrespect, tell falsehoods, deny the reality of what we've had to face. Lo, these 400 years in the United States of America. We have to have the capability to have actionable claims on people, just like if you deny the Holocaust ever occurred, you could be criminally charged with hate crimes. You could have your livelihood and your possessions and your goods taken from you. I want the same thing for my lineage. And I want it enshrined by law. So that when you attack me and my people, it's not just he, fun and games. No, it is us then coming after your pockets. It is us then legally coming after your livelihood. We need assistance with healing our families. Recently, there was a story I read of a sister who took her 14-year-old nonverbal son and left him at a hospital. Because that life of ours, that accrued disadvantage of ours, means that she don't have the adequate resources to be able to care for her nonverbal defective child, right? She has to demean herself to ask for any degree of assistance from the state. And the state continually cuts lifelines from administration to administration. No. Our families need a healing. We need brothers that are locked up in prison to be released. We need families to be brought back together. We need resources diverted from everybody else to the growth and the uplift of individual ADOS or DOAS or FBA families. We need support for our communities. We need laws against gentrification. All of it. And we need that to be enshrined, inviolable. Not just set up at the whims of administration from administration to administration. Those are my three things, fam. We need a land base with all the concomitant resources and rights that come along with the acquisition of a land base. I say we need at least 1 to 3 states worth of land in order for us to be able to have the basis, the means by which we can jumpstart our growth to get to a place where we can acquire capital and start to accumulate it as a legacy for our people. We need to have autonomy. We need to have the capability to have a say over who polices us, who rules us, and so on and so forth, similar to how the Native Americans do. We need assistance with being able to protect and defend our rights, up to and including military occupation if needed, in order to protect and defend our property, our rights, our lives, our bodies. And we also need the capability to be able to lift up arms without any requests for help or permission from anybody in order to defend ourselves. And lastly, but not completely, just in this list of things that I think would constitute a comprehensive restitution scheme, is we need incarcerated brothers and sisters to be freed and to have rehabilitation, actual rehabilitation. We need our families brought back together and being made whole from the war on drugs and other ills that have broken apart our community. We need actual healthcare resources and things like that to be brought to bear to help us heal from the health issues that we have, the mental health issues we have. We need assistance with being able to take care of our ones who cannot take care of themselves. As restitution, fam. This isn't something we beg in the United States for. This is ours. This is our due. It's simple as that. Fam, that's what I had to say about it. Let's hear what you think reparations looks like to you. 425-296-1980 is the number. We have so many things that we need to heal from, and the government has a responsibility to provide us with those resources to be able to heal from those things until such time as we can manage those things for ourselves. Not in a paternalistic way, not with them dictating how we address it, simply making the resources available and accessible for us to be able to address it. Our people have been locked up for crimes or survival, trying to make it out here on these streets when they've got nothing. They need rehab, and they need the ability to be able to have their lives be made whole, not continue to recidivize and provide fodder for the prison industrial complex. No, if anybody needs to address bad actors amongst our people, we need to. Because we could actually be compassionate upon them. We could actually take into account their circumstances before consigning them to football numbers worth of sentences in prison. Or worse yet, executing them with the lack of evidence that they even committed the crimes, things like that. No. If anybody's going to punish our people, we need to have the right to punish our people. Our people need to be released. They need to be freed. So many false crimes, being locked up for violations of mala prohibita laws. That just means that laws that says that because a thing is wrong, it's wrong because the law says so. Not mala in se. Not things that are wrong because they're wrong. Things that are wrong because it violated some rule or some law. No, free my fucking people. Let us handle them. Let us heal them. Let us have trained scientists and psychologists and so on and so forth. Where should this land be located at? I've got some ideas. I like the Pacific Northwest personally. I like Washington State, Oregon, parts of Cali.
Idaho.
Shit, throw Idaho in the mix. Don't nobody want Idaho? No way. 425-296-1980, fam. What does reparations look like to you? Wait, let me see what's going on. Ray Alexander, the criminal class sold out the black masses for nigger trinkets and made things worse. The law-abiding poor need safe neighborhoods and schools, not war zones of criminals. Ray, fam, what does that got to do with what I'm talking about? How many brothers and sisters are criminals because they were made into criminals? Matter of fact, I would argue, fam, that most people that are criminals are made up to be criminals. There are very few people that are actually doing stuff to be locked up in prison that are committing rapes, murders, things like that. Those people should be locked up. Those things are foul. But the vast majority of folk are locked up in prison for nonviolent just offenses because somebody said something was wrong. Fam, use your noodle. And besides, throwing our people in the hands of the white people, right, our fellow white citizens, how the hell does that actually benefit us? We give them our bad actors, and then they're allowed to use the fact that we have bad actors as an argument against us. Fam, Ray, there's actually a morally and ethically corrupt criminal class that are called black gatekeepers. You got a lot of politicians that are black folk that are just as criminally and morally and ethically corrupt, except their corruption is accepted because it's a part of the process of governing this motherfucker. What's the difference between the CBC getting a payoff from some person that's the representative of a company pumping bad chemicals into our community causing cancer clusters and stuff, and the fact that a brother is out there slanging dope on the block? Tell me what's the real difference. One's out there only maybe affecting the crackhead or the weed head that's buying the dope. This other one's affecting entire communities, but we don't have shit to say about them. That's facts. Ray, I'm all for holding people accountable. I am all for holding people accountable for bad actors. What I'm against is the fact that we don't have the capability to hold our people accountable. I'm tired of handing my people over to our fellow white citizens, is essentially throwing their lives away, using them as a means by which to continue to collectively punish all the rest of us, simply because they exist. Because bad actors in our ethnic group exist, that's a reason to collectively punish the entire ethnic group. No, if we can't control or take care of our own bad actors, they sure in the hell don't get to. We got a better chance of actually helping our bad actors to turn around than they do, because we actually have our bad actors' best interests in heart. The greater society does not. They will lock them away for football numbers, and they won't care whether or not they ever are rehabilitated or ever get their needs met or their families get their needs met. And so they keep the dysfunction going from generation to generation to generation, and we aid and abet in that. Ray, I'm thinking you're an intelligent brother. You need to rethink this one, fam. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying that you need to think about this in a little bit more depth and breadth than what you're mentioning in chat. There's a hell of a lot more to it than just, oh, these no good ass niggas need to stay away from good law abiding folk. No, there's a hell of a lot more to it than that. No shade, fam. I'm asking you to reconsider your position, to understand that there are nuances in this thing, fam. I'm with you. I hate seeing our communities be made dysfunctional by bad actors and criminal activity and all that stuff, but I believe that we can handle that. We can actually address that. And we actually have a better shot at addressing it than people who don't live in our communities. We actually have a heart to want to heal the situation, to be empathetic and compassionate and sympathetic. So who's better likely to get a better end result dealing with these bad actors? Somebody that actually wants to reconcile the bad actor to the community at large, or somebody who doesn't give a fuck, fam? Use your noodle. Think about this. That's all I'm saying, fam. Think about this. Ray, if you were to take any group of folk of every other ethnicity and put them through what we have been through, you would see. I live up here in Washington State, the whitest state, one of the whitest states in the union, fam. And up here, white folks is the niggas. Don't believe me? There's a city to the north of me called Everett, Washington. Anybody do your research. Do your research. Up here in Everett, Washington, white folks is the niggas. When the cops ride down on folk, them folk look like them. You be seeing these junkied out, heroined out, hoodie wearing, dusty ass white folks who get beat up, locked up, shot and killed in the whole 9 yards. Now, this is not to say that their experience is our experience, but what this is to say is that if you put any people of any ethnicity in a position of disenfranchisement, of inherited disadvantage, of inaccess to resources, of inaccess to being able to get out of the hole they're in, you're going to see the exact same behavior. These white folks don't even have our history, and yet they're expressing many of the same damn pathologies, which should let you know that perhaps it's the environment that's creating the pathologies, not the individuals. Nobody's asking you to give a pass to bad actors, fam. But we're supposed to be smarter than this. We got to look at the whole situation, the whole thing, fam. That's all I'm saying. Because you take anybody and put them in the same situation as us, they will act in many ways the same way. Anybody don't believe me, go to Appalachia, go to Kentucky, go to West Virginia, go to these places where there's permanent white underclass folk. And you see them murdering, you see them having single moms and babies out of wedlock, you see them drug dealing and bootlegging and hustling. You see them do all of that. You see them junkying it up and heroin it up and boozing it up, smoking it up. You see them with a lack of education. I agree, Ray. Be a part of the conversation, fam. Be a part of the conversation. Stop pointing your fingers at the ones who are the victims of a system of bullshit that has lasted 400 years. We need to start having those discussions about what those moral and ethical codes are that will enhance stable relationships between black men and black women, that will enhance families. Ain't nobody saying give anybody a pass, fam. We're saying look at what's causing it. Don't point at the symptoms. Let's point at the cause. Right? You coughing. Your nose is running. You know what I'm saying? You got a fever. So what we supposed to do? Just give you, you know what I'm saying, prophylaxis? We just supposed to make sure your nose stop running and give you, you know what I'm saying, something to stop you from coughing? And ibuprofen to bring your fever down? Or maybe we should understand the fact that you might have a motherfucking virus or something, or a bacterial infection, and treat that. Easy enough to look at the symptoms and come up with prophylaxis for symptoms. Hard as hell to actually diagnose the cure. 425-296-1980, fam, is the number. What does reparations look like to you? Let's dream the impossible dream. Do you agree with your brother Mark Black? Or do you have something else you'd like to share? Caller from 267, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name, where you calling from, and what's on your mind?
1v1 Pleb. I'm calling from Philly.
Yes, sir.
And,
what's up, 1v1? I'm glad you're calling in, fam. It's good to have you on the broadcast. I've been hoping to talk to you. What's on your mind, fam?
Nothing much, man. Number one, I'd just like to say that, you know, I really, really love your programming. You know, I like the topics that, you know, you address, and the way in which you come at it. You come at it from a different angle than I'm hearing it, you know, on other broadcasts. So I really appreciate you, brother.
It's my pleasure, fam. It's my honor.
Yeah. I wanted to take off on the point that the last point that you were making, and then go into, you know, what reparations looks like for me.
Okay.
One, you know, with the brother in the chat, I don't know. I'm not sure where he's coming from. I don't feel like, you know, a comment like that would be made by somebody that's authentically from the black community, because, you know, what we've seen is, you know, the justice system has been heaped on brothers and sisters in our community in a way that it's not in other communities. You know, the same crimes that, someone from the dominant society would commit, where they would get a slap on the wrist, no jail time. You see these brothers that are doing 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, straight
That's
up
not
football numbers. It's ridiculous, fam.
exactly. And it's not about policing crime. It's about taking the warrior class out of our society and to weaken our brothers and sisters so that, when injustices happen, when people come in and want to bomb our communities, when people come in and want to snatch the resources away from us, or hurt our babies or molest our babies, that we won't have a warrior class to stand up and step up to protect them. So I think it's more that the justice system is using that to really take particularly black men out of the fray. Just like it was in the 60s, where they used the welfare system to take black men out of the home. It's to take them out of our community so that young brothers don't have a model to look up to.
But you know what though, fam? It's not just the brothers, right? Because like when we talk about the disintegration of the black community, the black collective, right? The sisters have had their trials too. Now, this is not to say that we should not focus on all aspects, right? As a matter of fact, as many of you know, that I'm for brothers, speaking up for the brothers, right? Talking about the issues that affect black men specifically. But what this is to say is that really, if you look at it, there are both of us on both sides kind of looking at one side and the other one, thinking that one side or the other one has it just a little bit better than the other one. We're kind of both getting shafted in a lot of ways, right?
Exactly.
So, the thing is that what would truly fix this whole gender war thing that we've been seeing go on is the real understanding of just what both genders have had to face as a collective underneath this system, right? Like we talk about, things like extrajudicial police executions of black people. But that's not particularly happening to black women. It does happen to black women, right? Shout out to Corinne, right? Shout out to, the sister Atalantia, right? Who died in Texas recently. Like we know it happens to the sisters. You feel me? Yeah. But at the same token, this is essentially a black male issue, right? And so there's nothing wrong with us as brothers saying, wait a minute, we need specific buttressing, redress to help protect us from this issue. This isn't to say that it doesn't happen to sisters, right? And so on and so forth. But it is to say that when we talk about this, it happens to us so much that it is essentially our specific issue, right? And I kind of get where people like Ray's coming from, because believe it or not, fam, if you remember watching 13th 1v1, you remember in 13th, the sister was saying that part of the reason why Biden was able to get away with that bullshit ass law is because you had entire swathes of our population who were saying that our people are predators. Right? They bought into the same narrative language of predation, of being, killers for hire. Ray just called us, called people who do this sort of thing mercenaries. If our brothers and sisters who are labeled criminal are mercenaries, then they're the worst damn mercenaries on the planet. Because a mercenary would be able to successfully keep doing what they do and get paid.
Exactly.
But our black criminal class has the hammer brought down on them. If they're mercenary, if it's all just about the dollar bill and they're able to just do whatever, they're the worst damn mercenaries I've ever seen. But again, when you start to buy into this narrative that your brothers and sisters, bad actors though they might be influenced, you see, by various environmental circumstances and things like that triggers this sort of behavior, that creates these sort of spaces for these sort of narratives to exist, well then what he's saying makes perfect damn sense now, doesn't it?
Well, in many senses it does, but then you're not taking into account, and I'm not sure if you looked into it or delved into this deep, is that there's socioeconomic causes to every effect. Like you said it yourself, like if you look in the Appalachians, you have like hillbillies that have been up in the mountains for generations. All they know is bootlegging. All they know, and they look at themselves as separate from the greater society.
Wait a minute, what you talking about? They celebrate criminal culture in their music. Everybody talks about how rap music is so toxic and deleterious, right? Go listen to Appalachian people in the country music they listen to. It's all about outlaws, moonshining, bootlegging, the whole night. Like, how are we?
There whole generations.
Exactly,
those generations
man.
that have been raised up in that.
Any different in that respect? Or,
right.
To be more precise, how are they any different than our so-called? But see, Ray won't acknowledge the fact that they're just bad actors that are stuck in bad situations. And poverty is not a justification, but it is a role. It's correlative to criminal behavior. Ray, I would encourage you, fam, to do more study, because if you look at criminal justice studies, they show a clear correlation between poverty and criminal behavior. You can't sit here and say that we are the poorest of the poor, right? We are the bottom caste and expect everybody to act like angels. That's impossible. You're demanding an impossible standard of black people that you, Ray, I don't see demanding of the rest of America.
No, not at all. Not at all. And if you take away if you close down the factories, if you close down all opportunities for a person to rise himself up economically by socially acceptable means, by legal means, if you shut them out of that, and you give them substandard education, then you flood drugs into the society, then criminality is just the result. It's not necessarily what it winds up being played out to in the media. Exactly. What it winds up being played out in the media is that this is a result of a deficit in character amongst black people, not necessarily the result of impoverished circumstances.
That's the issue I have with the whole thing. Nobody's going to sit here and say that people have a right to be bad actors. I will never defend actual criminality, but to say that is somehow a defect of these individuals is also a flawed premise. It doesn't hold. Your conclusion that it has something to do with these individuals does not hold. It doesn't hold.
Not at all.
There are environmental factors. For example, Ray, I don't know, fam, I want to continue to address this a little more, man. So with your permission, I'd like to go ahead and have you drop off. You can call back in if you like, but I'd like to address this a little more.
Okay, you can go ahead. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking my call.
No, hey, thank you, man. You're always welcome. Please do keep calling in.
Definitely. Thanks
you,
a lot.
I appreciate you. Peace. Ray, I would like for you to do more research into epigenetics, because I really think that if you had even a surface level of understanding of what epigenetic science is starting to teach us about how our environment actually affects the genetic expression of individuals, which does directly affect behavior, you would have a different point of view. Right? Ray, the number is 425-296-1980, but don't call in just yet. I want to address you real quick, just briefly. I want you to do some research, fam, into epigenetics, right? Dr. Joy DeGruy talks a lot about the epigenetic effects of generations of trauma, the changing of the expression of certain genetic switches in our DNA due to the trauma that we faced. You feel me? Like if you look at, for example, there was a group of people born in Belgium during World War II when there was a big famine in the nation due to the Nazi occupation, right? The people born between this 3-year period over time had a 10 times higher expression of high blood pressure, obesity, and deaths related to comorbidities from obesity than every other Belgian. Just this 3 years. And what did they find? That each of these individuals that were born to women who bore children during this time of famine in their country. Don't tell me that environmental effects cannot affect people's behavior, from what foods they eat, what places they live, the mates they choose, the expressions of behavior. Certain switches can get switched on from child abuse. If you take a child from age 0 to 5 and you physically abuse them, there's actually a gene switch that gets switched on that causes them to be hyper aggressive. But if they have an actual, they have a gene that is mutated, that actually increases their aggression and their likelihood to hurt people. But these same individuals, if they're born into an environment that's a loving, supportive environment, actually with this gene mutation have a lower rate of aggressive behavior and criminal activity against others as they grow up. Even though they have this mutation, that mutation gets switched on by child abuse. There's study after study after study, Ray, that shows clearly the environmental effects, not just current environmental effects, but epigenetic environmental effects that are multi-generational, that dictate people's behaviors, their choices, and things like that. And I think you need to study that a little bit more. You see what I'm saying? Before you issue these blanket statements about just throw these no good criminal ass mercenary predatory niggas away. You feel me? Ray, the phone is open, fam. 425-296-1980. We can have this discussion. I would love to discuss this with you more. Fam, I also would like to hear from y'all what reparations looks like to you in the absence of a plebiscite or some means by which we can gauge everybody's ideas on it. This is the only way you're going to get a chance to express what you think restitution, what reparations looks like to you. 425-296-1980, fam. Monty said the abused kid I knew stopped growing when he was out of abusive situation. He grew to 6'2". I believe it. Poverty-stricken environments, lack of access to proper food and nutrition, abusive situations from being raised by parents who have not had any support or learned how to raise children properly. That has effects that stretch on for generations. All of which is why we need not just passive supports, but active supports for our criminal family members, right? For people who struggle with raising their children and so on and so forth. You feel me? We need that. Because there are clear effects of the trauma that we have faced. Why do you think black people have a higher expression of high blood pressure than every other ethnic group in this country? Because we've constantly lived in a state of hostility. Our bodies, from the time that we're old enough to be aware of our environment, exist in fight or flight, constantly being flooded with cortisol and steroidal compounds, which of course are stress-related hormones, which over time increases the calcification of our veins, the hardening of our arteries, which increases blood pressure. And yes, Richard said, isn't there a notion that children who grow up in abusive situations are more likely to be abusive parents? Of course. I'm not certain who this is. The number's not showing. So please give your name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind.
What's going on, Mark Black? This is Ray Alexander. What's happening, man?
Hey, what's up, fam? Hey, I'm glad to have you join the broadcast. Thank you so much for giving us that chance to have this discussion, fam. And I thank you for trusting me to have this discussion with you. So I don't want to diminish your arguments, right? So I'm going to basically buttress your arguments. I'm going to steel man you, right? And I want to make sure that we're clear on what it is that you're stating, right? I don't want to misrepresent you or whatever. So I'll have you give me your basic premises, right, from the get-go.
Okay.
Go ahead, fam. The floor is yours. I want you to basically establish your argument because you're saying various statements. So what I want you to do is condense your argument down, state your premises, and then the conclusion that you derive from those premises, okay?
Okay. Now, can you hear me pretty well?
Yeah, I
on
can
that,
hear you
Mark?
just fine, fam. You coming in loud and clear, and thank you again.
Okay, man. What I'm saying is this, that our concentration as ADOS should be on law-abiding people who are highly principled, who want to build a better society. People who have already participated in the criminal class, we really don't need to invest any energy on them. We need to be concentrating on developing wholesome, healthy relationships between black men and women to establish healthy marriages and families and economic independence. And the people who sold out in the criminal class to sell crack to put us further in the bottom, they were cooperating and compliant with white supremacy.
Okay,
so we
now
don't have
pause
time or energy
for a second,
them.
if you would, Ray, because you stated
Okay.
your conclusion. That's not actually an argument. I want you to establish from a clear chain of premises. Take all the time you need. What I want you to do is make a series of statements that you believe supports your conclusion, right? Because what you've basically done just now was state your conclusion. That's cool. We see where you at. That resources that we would be utilizing to benefit the so-called criminal class or whatever the case may be should not be devoted to that, but only to, law-abiding people who have not in any way kind of been co-opted by white supremacy. That's your conclusion. I want you, though, to establish the validity, at least, of that conclusion with a series of arguments. Tell us why that should be your conclusion, why we should conclude that, please, if you would.
Well, part of it, I'll do the best I can on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's the tall order for this particular conversation. What I'm saying is they have proven that they are of no value to our people, that they have sold us out, that they are open to being complicit with white supremacy for trinkets, and that they are fine with our other people suffering because of their gangland warfare. And we just they have no place. When we're trying to establish safe communities that are ethical and principled, where families can thrive, we don't need people with that type of backwards mentality, with that type of criminal mentality.
Got you. So let me ask you a series of questions, if you don't mind, brother. I appreciate the opportunity for us to have this discussion. Okay. Do you believe, in your honest opinion, right, be an honest actor, do you believe that there is any possibility for redemption for anybody labeled criminal from our ethnic group in this society? In other words, once somebody is labeled criminal, right, through whatever criminal activity they chose, whether it was gangbanging, drug dealing, etc., right, do you believe that there is any possibility of redeeming them or rehabilitating them, or no?
I believe that there's what we call spiritual redemption as far as our faith. However, I don't believe that people who proactively participated in mercenary, predatory, criminal activity against black people who are law-abiding are worth associating with, that if we were in charge, we would have more harsh laws against them. We would have far more harsh. We would have Saudi Arabian type laws against them for molestation of our children, for rape of our women. So they are abused. They are just in a civic society that allows them to be very abusive. But if we were in charge, people who would molest our child, or rape our women would get the death penalty. We wouldn't waste $40,000 a year on them.
Okay.
So we want people who are principled.
No, I got where you're coming from on that. All right. So my next question is as follows. How is it that we determine then who are these irredeemable people? Because in the current process that we are familiar with here in the United States, right, there's a so-called due process, right? A person is arrested. They are then charged with an offense. They then go before a tribunal, whether it's a judge or a jury, and there is a trial that's held. And if the judge or the jury convicts said individual, they then are penalized and subsequently face whatever sentence it is that they face. Okay, that's supposed to be the process. However, due to the fact of the justice system, or I should say the criminal justice system, right, having pieces of it every step along the way where there shows a clear bias in asserting those rights for due process for our people specifically, right? In other words, from the point of arrest all the way to the point of sentencing, we can establish clear disparate treatment that shows that our people face obstacles at every step of that process. How then can we say definitively that criminality has been determined when they have not gone through a process that is as unbiased as we can make it? How do you account for the fact that there are people that are labeled criminal in a biased process that is almost set up to label people of our ethnic group as criminal? How do you account for that in your determination as to whether or not these individuals are irredeemable? How do you take that into account?
I hear you. We can't address everything immediately right now. I'll say what I can say as much as I can. We have to have systems that are workable, that will come together by the people who have the minds to do it. At this point, being apologist for a criminal class that has no ethical value, that is not trying to advance
wait, hold on a second, Ray. You don't actually, based off of what you're saying, you don't actually get to make that determination, because you cannot clearly establish that there has been a process that is favorable, right? In other words, an unbiased, legitimate process that has actually labeled these people properly as criminals. We see statistics all the time. If you look at the Innocence Project, there are brothers and sisters right now who sit on death row or who have life sentences for murders and other violent crimes that have been clearly shown with an examination of the evidence, unbiased, to be completely innocent, right? So because you cannot establish a clear chain of unbiased determination of the actual criminality of said individuals, you don't get to label them as a criminal class, right? Because we haven't been able to say definitively, clearly, in an unbiased, measurable method that these people are actually irredeemable criminals. You can't argue that, because you have no way of saying that the process by which we make this determination is unbiased, that it is neutral, and that it works 100% of the time.
Well, when you say things like 100%, we have to have systems that are viable and workable on that. You work in the legal profession, Mark. You understand that it's not what I'm trying to do is to get us to stop focusing our energies on apologizing for predatory criminals who have no desire to build the type of institutions for viable Black social, economic, and political advancement.
Now that Ray may be a place that we have a point to stand on in agreement. Let me share with you why I think that is probably one of the most valid statements you've made, right? It is clear to me, as well as to any thinking, sane, rational person, right, that there is always going to be an element of individuals, no matter the culture, no matter where you are, what you are, that have no desire to do anything but see the world burn. And we do need mechanisms in place to address said individuals. So I absolutely agree with you. And if we had a process, right, or I should say, when such a process is developed that does not bias itself towards labeling our specific people of our specific lineage as criminal, right? And so on and so forth. When we have a clear process and a clear statement of principles that allow for that process, and you're right, as somebody who is legally trained, so to speak, I'm not going to sit here and argue for 100% compliance. As long as there's always a possibility of doubt, right? We cannot say for a certainty that any legal apparatus which we operate is going to work 100% of the time. But we can say that it should work beyond a reasonable doubt. And with all of the evidence in play that suggests that in the main, from arrest to sentencing, it does not work for us beyond a reasonable doubt, then we have to question the very appellation of the label of criminal on many individuals, right? We have to actually, so I would agree with you, Ray, that once we get into a place where we've addressed specifically the harms that have been done us, where we have a degree of autonomy and the capability to police our own, to develop those systems that allow us to be able to actually do justice properly, then in that particular case, we can argue for some pretty, I would even call draconian rules on how to address bad actors and things like that. What I'm saying though, Ray, is that I believe that your arguments, in a sense, put the cart before the horse. We have not been able to ever have a proper expression of what constitutes justice since we've been here. We have laws on the books that the government has consistently ignored, that the apparatus of the state, i.e. law enforcement, prosecutors, and so on, have consistently violated when it comes to us. We have clear evidence that shows that at every step of the way in the so-called justice system, there is a bias toward honoring our rights, showing us proper respect, treating us as innocent until proven guilty, and so on and so forth. In the absence of those things, I think you're putting the cart before the horse. I think that because of the traumas and things that we faced, it is not an improper argument to say that in the interim, we need resources devoted to us all. Now, once we've been able to clearly break out and establish said processes, then I would argue that it is time for us to have the discussion that you're definitely down to have. Would you agree?
Well, let me answer you this way. The focus should be on people who are law-abiding, principled, and ethical to build safe, productive societies and institutions. People who are a part of the criminal class in this particular society will try to do the same in any society we build.
You can't. You haven't established that through any. You're making a naked assertion, fam. You have not established that by any degree of evidence. As a matter of fact, you're trying to extrapolate current future circumstances from current circumstances, and the only thing at best you can do is correlate. You can't establish a chain of causation.
It's the best predictor of future behavior.
No, that's actually not the case. That is not the case. You are actually talking to a brother that at one point of time you would have been able to consign as a member of this irredeemable group. I have gangbanged. I have been a part of criminal enterprises and so on and so forth. And through the opportunity to be able to get assistance through therapy and through the engaging of other methods and means by which to rehabilitate myself, I have become what anybody would classify as a productive member of our people, of our society, and so on and so forth. For you to argue that these people can commit these acts at one point in time, and thus, because past actions is the best indicator of future behavior, is on its face nonsensical.
Well, I would say that you're an exception that proves the rule. And we can look at other societies. We can look at Nigeria, how dysfunctional and how it's even a criminal state. So we can, if we don't have to go far, we can look at the present reality of Black nations, and we can look at the criminal classes that run those nations, and we don't have to look far. What we need to do, and I hope that you'll come to terms and agree with me, is focus on ethical, principled people who want to build a good society. And I understand that, people are still looking for another Malcolm. And that whole thing of trying to find an ethical person in the criminal class now in the prison system, that's over with. What we need to do is have people who have enough respect to defend, to marry and honor the women that they're going to be with, protect and provide for their children and families, and associate and build with like-minded people.
Fam, how are we supposed to do that? How are we supposed to do that? Let me finish my statement, please. Let me finish my statement. How are we supposed to do that if we have been denied the means to do that?
Well, I'm saying that on some areas there may be, if you're viewing it being denied the means, but you have just said that you're a productive, self-sufficient
that was in spite
of,
fam. That was not necessarily that was not necessarily because of
the question. But there are people like you who grew up in poor backgrounds, who grew up around people who did things that were unethical and unprincipled, but we stood up and made a way for ourselves. We didn't participate in that. A lot of us came out of families that were not the best, that were not rich. In some kind of way, we joined the military,
I did participate
got our degrees, got out here and participated in a society.
I did participate in it. I'm telling you to your face that I did participate in that. I grew up in an environment which was hyper violent. I was the victim of abuse by my family and many other people that surrounded me. I was sexually abused and the whole 9 yards. I was one of the most intelligent kids in my neighborhood and still dropped out of school at 10th grade, right? The education that I have currently, fam, I actually went and got on my own in spite of what obstacles I've had to face. And every step of the way, there were people who were telling me that due to the fact that I came from this background or came from this environment, that the likelihood that I would not succeed was astronomical. I was supposed to be a statistic. I'm not the exception that proves the rule, fam. You actually made my point for me. If you put anybody in those circumstances, why be surprised when they express those behaviors? Fam, we can sit here and have a conversation all day, fam, and you will not be able to deny my obvious intellect, my obvious care about the issues and concern, right? If you think I was the only brother that's like me, you'd be sadly mistaken. But sometimes, fam, your environment, your circumstances make it damn nearly impossible for you to be able to do anything. And when you have a clear correlation between economic status, i.e. poverty or relative wealth, and criminality, when you have a system that is consistently biased towards establishing a criminal status for a particular ethnic group, I'm not certain how it is that you're saying that we can't devote anything towards fixing that. That just makes no sense, fam. I get where you're coming from, but you haven't been able to establish through any clear evidence.
I support you, Black Outcast Media. I hear where you're coming from. We're closer than we seem, but I see a lot of people who are trying to do some heavy lifting to improve what we're trying to do, and these criminal-minded, predatory, mercenary abusers of the Black community want you to apologize for their behavior.
No,
they want
don't.
you to blame white supremacy.
No, they don't.
And they want you to make all types of theories like the new Jim Crow to justify their criminal behavior.
No, they don't, fam. As a matter of fact,
people.
Even if we see here, I'm about to show you that you're incorrect again, because the fact is, fam, is that even if we were to be apologists for these individuals, the system under which we live does not hear our apologetics. In other words, when Black people commit crimes or even are alleged to commit crimes, they go to jail. They do not escape. They either go to jail, they end up dead, or they end up in some sort of nut house, drugged out, or whatever the case may be. Our criminals don't have no space in this country to be able to exist as a criminal class. Matter of fact, fam, every other ethnic group in this country has been allowed to indulge in criminal activity and use the proceeds from said criminal activity to be able to further the gains of themselves as individuals as well as their collective. If you look at the Kennedys, Joseph Kennedy was a damn drug dealer. Not even a generation later, he had 2 sons that ran for president of the United States. Name me the last time that's been allowed to occur with Black folk.
What I'm saying is this. Brother Mark. Check this out. I am saying is that the broken Black family in a situation in a society like this that has biases against people will have people in position to be abused by that society. For us to be in position where we're not going to be abused, we need wholesome marriages and families to protect our wives and children.
So basically, you're saying that in order for us to be able to move forward as a people, we all basically have to speak with erudition, right? The Queen's English. We have to dress in after six clothing. We have to be angels. There cannot be any criminal element whatsoever in our communities. And we all need to be educated with PhDs before we can ever actually have our humanity asserted. That's respectability talk, fam. And I'm sorry, but the data does not support your assertions.
Let me interject. Mark. Let me interject.
Please, sir.
Yes, we should be our best version of who we can be, and we can assert ourselves. And I think that's probably why our great-grandparents who were living under strict racist Jim Crow laws were more productive and built more institutions than we're able to build now.
Fam, I would argue that if you were to go back to our brothers and sisters who lived under Jim Crow, they had just as many criminals.
And acquired 13 million acres of land, and now we are sitting here without that type of land.
No. You don't get to pull that bullshit. For every so-called Black Wall Street story that you can pull out of your ass, fam, and this is no disrespect, you had the vast majority of us living in the mud, the morass. You had the vast majority of us shooting dice on the corner. You had the vast majority of us who worked our asses off in the fields and then went look for a drink afterwards.
Why are we in the 21st century digital economy and we're not raising Black children for academic excellence to take advantage of all the institutions and all the economic and political resources that were fought for us by the civil rights movement generation?
I hear you. I will just say that we have to be at this point, we're at an area of disagreement. I brought data to strongly support my assertions that I made. You obviously have your way of thinking about it. I'm not seeing where we're going to actually convince one or the other one.
The data we're looking at right now is that we are economically falling behind because of lack of marriage, because of lack of commitment, and we're having our children raised in chaos.
I heard what you had to say. You don't have to convince me of what you have to say. I got it, right? I just simply don't agree that you're on the right track. But with that having been said, can we at least, right, because I want to move on to another caller here, but can we at least agree to do this? Can we refrain from the pejoratives, right? I get where you're saying about I don't think you've established criminal class, right, and so on and so forth. Just refrain from the pejoratives, right? We have enough of the mechanisms of criminal justice in this country that will ensure that if you're correct, we will see those numbers of our individuals being held to account. We don't need you specifically arguing to hold them into account. Trust me, America has no problem holding Black criminality and any alleged Black criminal class to account, right? So can I ask then that we just allow the processes to take place as they currently stand, right? In other words, fam, you're not going to convince anybody by the use of pejorative terms like criminal class and things like that and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to convince you by making arguments based on epigenetics and so on and so forth. Can we at least agree to refrain as best we're able from the use of pejoratives? If we could do that, Ray, then I think we're going to be good.
I respect you.
I appreciate that,
Mark, and I understand the hard work that you're doing.
I appreciate where you're coming from, fam. I really do.
That we need to have a broader understanding and invest our limited resources on people that are trying to do right. I'll be honest with
you. That's your opinion that my understanding isn't broad, because I could make the same argument that your understanding is very facile. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat you as arguing in good faith, and will just simply say that we don't agree. And I hope that at one point we can come to a point of agreement, whether my understanding or yours. So I appreciate the opportunity for the discussion. It was definitely instructive. Please feel free to call in anytime, fam. You are welcome here. All right. And
thank you. And I did mean to say that I do believe that your understanding is broad. that you have a vast amount of information. Now, if I'm not
I
trying to
thank you,
limit,
fam.
okay.
I don't go much in for praise, but I definitely accept that in the spirit in which you offer it. I very much appreciate you, fam. And don't be a stranger, all right?
All right, then. Take care, Mark.
You too, sir. Thank you. Caller from 303, it's your man Mark Black. What's your name? I'm sorry, 301. It's your man Mark Black. What's your name? Where you calling from, and what's on your mind?
Well, this is the senior elder calling from 301.
Yes, sir. Elder brother, share your name with everybody. I call you elder brother because you like my big brother, but I want everybody to know your name.
My name is Richard.
Thank you, brother Richard. I appreciate the elder brother. He's from the DMV area, representing, holding us down. We appreciate you, elder brother. Go ahead and share your wisdom with us today.
Yes, yes. I was listening at that very long exchange, interaction between you and the brother, and what I was coming up with that he doesn't really believe in reconciliation. I get the feeling that he doesn't believe in reconciliation. But concerning your question, what does reparation look like?
Yes, sir.
I had a course in economics called, it was the study of the economic condition in sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my professor. He was from Nigeria. In other words, he was Igbo. He was Igbo, and his name was Igbo Ezeani. But he had said that what reparation look like for me, it's going to look like similar. Well, to start out with, it should be somewhat on the level of the Marshall Plan.
Okay, yeah, run it down for the family, elder brother Richard, who don't know what the Marshall Plan is, because I always like to make sure we educate while we elucidate. So run it down. What was the Marshall Plan for those brothers and sisters that don't understand or didn't know what it is?
Okay, the Marshall Plan was something that was initiated by the European powers or the NATO powers after World War II to rebuild Europe. In other words, it was a plan that John Marshall, I think it was John Marshall, he was the initiator. They named the plan after John Marshall, but it was a plan that after Europe had gone through the devastations of World War II and so forth, it had to be rebuilt. And so one of the constructs to rebuild Europe and so forth, and after the devastation of World War II and so forth, the European powers came up with what they call it, NATO. They was called Russia and all of them. They came up with to rebuild Europe. They would follow a Marshall Plan where they would allocate so many resources, financial and so forth, to rebuild Europe.
Yeah, there was actually a senator, because you were very close. There was a senator here, last name of Marshall, who came up with a plan to actually help rebuild the European nations that had been devastated by war, right? That had been devastated by the World War.
Okay. Yeah, I get them mixed up with. I guess it was, who was that general in the British Army? I was trying to think of the general in the British Army. Yeah, but I get them mixed up with him. But yeah, it was a plan, to rebuild Europe. But reparations for me should not be a short-term goal. It should be like a long-term goal. It has been estimated that by the year 2053 that the wealth of ADOS people in the United States will be down to like zero. But we won't have any wealth. So
go ahead.
It should run at least.
How could I
think it should run at least 10 increments of 10 years, and then you take an evaluation, but it should run at least up to. Are you familiar with Sean Rochester? I don't know. He has done. Are you there? Okay.
I'm here, elder brother. Go ahead.
Okay. Are you familiar with Sean Rochester? He's a financial expert, and he has done some extensive research. His work is called The Black Tax. I think it's called The Black Tax. So he has done extensive work on the cost of what our people being enslaved costs, and what the Jim Crow costs and so forth. But he has estimated it at least respectable estimate is at least about between 25 and 30 trillion dollars for what have been done. He has put a price. In other words, he has taken it out the emotional state and put a price tag on it, like
right.
About 25
now,
to 30
when was
million
this work
dollars.
Published? Do you know? Because I'm certain if it was published a while back, the numbers would be higher.
Let me get it right. 25 to 30 trillion dollars. But if we are to look at, if we are to look at the domestic product of the wealth that's accumulated in the United States of America now is about $110 trillion a year, or so forth. And they said we're getting about 2.2% or so forth of the gross wealth. So with us being at least close to about 20% of the population, I think we should be at least being allocated at least enough wealth where we're getting 20% of that, 20% of that, of that total wealth. But it should be a long-term goal. What a brother was talking about, the criminal justice system, although South Africa hasn't really, reached total liberation, or haven't, reached equality, or haven't reached justice from what was done through them to apartheid. But when apartheid was in, they set up a tribunal, and all of those South African criminal justice law enforcement officers that had committed such brutal crimes and so forth, they went before this tribunal.
You're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right, Elder?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But because if you believe in reconciliation, you believe in redemption and so forth, and you believe that there has been injustices in the criminal justice system towards ADOS people, then something like that, once we get reparations, something like that type of system should be set up so that you can determine those who are maybe fit for society, or those who require psychological treatment, psychotherapy treatment, and so forth can get it, and those who are just maybe lost. You're not going to be able to reconcile everybody back into the ADOS community, or reconcile. We realize nuances. We realize that there has been injustices in the criminal justice system.
Yep.
If we accept that as a premise, we accept that we have received injustice in the criminal justice system, then something like that should be set up also. But I believe it should be something. That's what reparations. It's got to be at least something that would be initiated up to 2020 coming in, up to at least about 20 years.
I have a question for you, Brother Elder Richard. Do you have any concerns about the possibility of any comprehensive restitution schema being altered or even eliminated from administration to administration? Because I get where you're coming from. I do think that there's a valid argument being made for a multi-generational reparations or restitution schema. The problem that a lot of people have, including myself at times, is that we have consistently seen that one administration will put forward something that benefits us, right? But then we see another administration come into office, whether it's a new president or a new set of Congress people, and slowly but surely over time, those things that were supposed to be inviolate, right, that were never supposed to be taken away from us, either were diluted, watered down, included other people other than us, or were simply eliminated over time, right? Do you not have any concerns at all about whether or not that that there will be that same effect for our justice claims should it be made into a lengthy period of time, such as what you're referring to? Because 20 years is five presidential administrations. That's actually 10 congressional classes and 3 senatorial classes, right? That's a long ass time. So I just wanted to know if you had any concerns about that.
Yes, well, the way the political climate is from administration to administration, it has to be something on the level of would it have to be an amendment? Would it have to be an amendment to the Constitution, or would it have to? What form would it have to take for it to be watered down, totally obliterated by an administration? Would it have to be in the form of an amendment or what?
Good question. So, what we've seen is that, and granted, what has been done for us has been actually very minuscule in the whole scheme of things if you really look at it. But what we've seen is that historically it's been a combination of a faulty executive that refused to prosecute violations of our right and our due and so on and so forth, and new legislation or amendments to legislation that then waters down our specific justice claims and so on and so forth. So it's a combination of both, right? And we've seen that, like, if you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act, and so on and so forth, the constant need to renew it every so often, and all these other things. And then, of course, you got SCOTUS in play, right? The Supreme Court, who then, if some, disaffected schmuck who has no real say in it, like an Asian or somebody else, files a lawsuit arguing the validity of the legislation, then they get to weigh in on it and so on and so forth. So my point is that, while I think that there is definitely a valid and even a sound argument to be made for a long-term multi-generational reparations schema, right? I think that there are also just as valid and sound concerns about the possibility of the diminishing or the elimination of it via successive administrations in office too as well. So just something I want us to think about.
Yes, and then we have to also consider, given that reparations is effective, and then we begin to be empowered as a people, that we will have, say in 10 years, our political power we could be in a better political state, or have more political power, be more politically empowered. So it's things, yes, but that would be things we have to consider, that also,
Got
we
you.
have to consider after, if we got 20% of the wealth of the United States allocated for 4 years, what will we be in 4 years?
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about this is that at this point, we should be encouraged to examine everybody's ideas around this thing. Because the fact is that whatever occurs, right, whatever the comprehensive restitution schema ultimately looks like, if we have no say in it, then it's truly not justice. And I think that's the primary point that I'm trying to make today with this broadcast, is that all too often what we have, the people, right, the masses of our lineage, what we get is essentially people coming up with master plans and dictating to us what justice should look like for us. What I would like for us to do is I would like for us, the people, right, the masses of our lineage group, right, our ethnic group, to start thinking about this thing in the sense that we should have just as much a say in what constitutes justice for us and our ancestors than anybody else. In other words, it is not a project of the talented 10th, right? It's not the Boule. It's not some gatekeeper organization that ultimately gets to dictate for us what justice looks like for us. We need to have individual, familial, community, and ultimately tribal visions of what justice will look like for us when everything is all said and done in its finality. Right. So I thank you for definitely sharing with me what that will look like for you. And so with that in mind, brother, I want to say peace to you. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. And thank you so much for your wisdom. I appreciate you.
Okay. Peace, my brother.
Peace. Fam, great calls so far, great calls. And I also want to thank all of you for your engagement with Brother Ray. We can disagree with each other without being personally disagreeable. I've seen arguments that talk about that in praxis, right? In practice, Black people are actually very conservative. I think that there is actually a place for an argument such as the one that Brother Ray has brought. Once we're in a position to have the ability for our own autonomy, control over our own land bases, I think that his argument isn't invalid. I just think it's premature, especially in light of the fact that we currently exist under the system under which we exist. With those clear disparities, those clear issues, it's a little difficult to argue truthfully that all of the people labeled criminal under this current milieu are just throwaways. And that's where we disagree. But I really do appreciate the consistent, positive engagement with the brother. And I want to say I appreciate the brother having the courage to share his point of view. This is what this platform is for. Right? We're not going to always have a place where we can stand right away for agreement. But what we can do is make sure that every voice that brings as best it's able positive arguments, that we can have a combat of ideas and so on and so forth. I too agree that that there's some things that we need to consider, especially when it comes to people who just want to see the world burn, right? But to basically throw away entire swathes of our people simply because they have been labeled criminal under this current milieu, I don't think we've established any justification for that. Durable Goods said the respectability politics phrase is problematic. The use is too vague and possibly overused. You know what, Durable? I always like to define the terms that I use, right? That way we have a level of clarity as to exactly what it is that I'm saying. When I refer to respectability politics, what I mean is the idea that us changing any and all of our behaviors will have any positive effect on the mentality of those people who have an interest in not seeing our humanity. In other words, I'm not saying that Brother Ray is necessarily arguing respectability in the sense that it's going to influence whites. I think that his concern is more that we start to see a respectable path for us. I don't want to be disingenuous in misframing his statements, but respectability politics, as I defined it, is definitely an issue. We have a lot of Black folk out here who think that if we just throw entire swathes of Pookies and Shaniquas and criminals and whatever the scapegoat of the day is amongst our people under the bus, that white folks will all of a sudden wake up and say, you know what, they've taken care of all of their issues, it's time to treat them like human beings now. That's not the case. Right? They have a vested interest in denying us our essential humanity, regardless of what it is we do or don't do. Right? Especially when we're holding black folk to an impossible standard. There will never be a community where crime does not exist, where there are people who are where there are not people who are uneducated, and so on and so forth. So to pretend that black people cannot have that and still have their essential humanity respected is disingenuous right from word say go. All right, fam. Hey, we've had some great calls. It's Saturday, it's y'all's weekend. I want to be respectful of that. I want us, as I was telling the elder brother Richard, I want us, the people, to start thinking about what justice looks like for us as individuals, as families, as communities and collectives, and ultimately as a tribe, right? We should not have to sit here and be dictated to, whether it's by America at large or by gatekeepers or by people who think they know better than us and so on and so forth. No, you have just as much a capability to be able to determine what justice looks like as anybody else. So I want to encourage you, fam, to dream the impossible dream. Everybody tells us that our goal is whacked out and we're never going to reach it. I say they're liars. Justice will be done. But we need to make sure, fam. Black man, I'm hungry. I'm tired. I would love to take your call, fam, but it might have to be the next broadcast. I appreciate your forbearance, fam. I know you got a lot to say, but this has been one hell of a broadcast, and I want to kind of finish it up, get some food in me, get some energy, and kind of wrap it up. I'm sorry, fam. I'd love to take your call, but let's do it the next go round, because you're welcome. Fam, I want to thank everybody for their time today, for a great conversation, for great discussion, for us upholding our principles of disagreeing without being personally disagreeable, for examining what justice looks like to us and not refusing to have that dictated to us. We have that right, and I want us to make sure that we start to exercise it. So with that, fam, as always, I want to leave you all with my love and wishes of love, peace, prosperity, and power, real power to our people.